For 2 years, Darvis was just a single father trying to survive, raising his little boy alone and hoping the world would finally leave them in peace. Then the city's most feared Enigma CEO noticed him. Everyone feared Alexis Jace. No one dared stand in his way. But when he met the quiet Omega who had sacrificed everything for his child, he made a promise to protect them both. What began as an unexpected act of kindness soon became a love neither of them saw coming. But just as Darvis finally dared to believe in happiness again, a ghost from Alexis's past returned, determined to destroy the family they were building together. Can love survive when the past refuses to let go? This is an original BL Heartstrings Stories production. Chapter 1: The Shadow of Loss. His world came crashing down with a single phone call. "Hello, is this Darvis?" "Yes," he murmured, a cold knot of dread tightening in his chest. "You are listed as the emergency contact for Davina. Please come to St. John's Hospital immediately." He didn't remember the drive. He didn't remember running through the sterile corridors or the exact words the doctor used to break his heart. All he knew was the unbearable weight of the news, a head-on collision. His sister and her husband were dead. Their 9-month-old son Luca was in the emergency room, connected to medical devices, fighting for his life. Davina had been his entire world. Orphaned at 6 years old, they had faced the struggles of the world side by side. They had fought their way through school, secured good jobs, and when she fell in love with Edwin, Darvis had felt so happy for her. He thought the darkness was finally behind them. But today was the darkest day he had ever known. The heavy double doors of the ICU room pushed open, and the doctor stepped inside with grave expressions. "Mr. Darvis," Dr. Nathan began softly, "Luca has a severe brain bleed. To give his tissue time to rest and reduce the swelling, we've placed him in a medically induced coma. The prognosis is guarded, but he is young and his vitals are stable. We have faith that he will pull through. His chances are strong." When the doctors left, Darvis sank back into the chair beside the crib. He looked down at Luca and he let the tears freely fall. He reached out with a trembling hand, gently brushing the tip of his finger against Luca's tiny warm foot, anchoring himself to the soft rise and fall of the baby's chest. He wasn't allowed to stay in that quiet grief for long. 2 police officers appeared at the door to take him to identify his sister and her husband. Walking into the morgue felt like descending into an abyss. When the attendant pulled back the white sheets, Darvis's knees nearly buckled. Davina looked like she was asleep. "Oh God, Davina, how could this be?" he choked out, breaking down completely. In one single night, it felt like the earth had disappeared beneath him, leaving him falling down a deep, bottomless canyon. The identification and the joint burial all happened in a blur, an agonizing fog of black coats, gray skies, and silent arrangements. Through the haze, Darvis clung to only one thought: Luca has to wake up. He was granted a leave of absence from work, living in a quiet limbo for 3 grueling weeks. He was on his way to get some medical supplies from the pharmacy when Dr. Nathan intercepted him in the hallway. The swelling in the brain had finally reduced, and they were ready to wake him up. They slowly weaned 9-month-old Luca off the sedatives. Darvis sat by the crib, holding his breath for hours. Then those tiny eyelids fluttered open. Dark, glassy eyes looked up at him. Darvis let out a choked, tearful laugh, bringing Luca's little hand to his lips. He was going to save this baby no matter what it took. Chapter 2: Silk and Suppressants. And that was how his journey into unplanned fatherhood truly began. The early days were an exhausting trial by fire. Darvis quickly realized he couldn't afford the distraction of his own biological needs. To keep up with the brutal demands of caring for Luca entirely alone, he started wearing heavy suppressants. He didn't have time for his biology, not when a helpless child was relying on him for survival. His life flattened into a disciplined, lonely routine. He dropped Luca off at daycare, went to work, and no longer socialized. His world revolved around Luca alone. Time blurred past. Luca turned 1, his wobbly toddler steps taking over the apartment. A year after that, he was a bright, energetic 2-year-old. As Luca grew, so did the financial burden. The costs of food, clothes, healthcare, and quality childcare left the bills piling up faster than Darvis could handle. Desperate for stability, Darvis changed jobs for a better one, securing a high-paying corporate position as a senior financial analyst at Jace Enterprises. The incredible salary meant he could finally breathe financially, and it allowed him to enroll Luca in the elite corporate daycare located right inside the headquarters building. It was the perfect arrangement. He could commute with his son and check on him during lunch breaks. The only catch was the man at the top of the empire, Alexis Jace. Everyone in town knew who Alexis was, a formidable, dominant enigma who ran his empire with ruthless precision. Working under the same roof meant Darvis had to be extra vigilant with his suppressants, convincing himself he could stay completely off Alexis's radar. That conviction shattered on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in the lobby. Darvis was carrying a bag of snacks and holding Luca's hand when Luca dropped his stuffed rabbit. It tumbled across the polished marble floor, right into the path of a tall, imposing figure surrounded by nervous executives. Alexis Jace stopped in his tracks. His heavy, dominant aura pressed into the room like a physical weight. Before Darvis could react, 2-year-old Luca waddled straight up to the formidable enigma, completely oblivious to the danger. Luca picked up his rabbit, looked right into Alexis's cold, piercing gaze, and pointed a chubby finger at his leather shoes. "Big shoe," Luca babbled happily. Darvis's blood ran completely ice-cold. "Luca, no!" he gasped, rushing forward and pulling his son back into a protective hold while bowing deeply. "I am so sorry, Mr. Jace. He's two," he slipped away from me. "It won't happen again." Alexis didn't answer right away. His intense, dark eyes locked onto Darvis. "He's yours?" Alexis asked, his voice a deep, low baritone that vibrated straight through the floorboards. "Yes, sir," Darvis replied directly, clutching Luca tight against his chest. "He's my son. I work in senior financial analysis on the 12th floor." Alexis gave a single, slow nod, his gaze lingering on the father and son before walking away. "Keep a tighter grip on him, Darvis. The floors in the lobby are slippery." Late that night, high above the city, Alexis Jace stood alone in his penthouse glass office, a crystal glass of whiskey in hand. Darvis thought he was clever with those heavy, high-grade suppressants. To any regular alpha or beta, Darvis smelled like nothing more than crisp cotton and coffee. But Alexis was an enigma and nothing got past him. In the lobby, Alexis's senses had pierced right through the chemical mask. Beneath the artificial quiet lay the scent of a night blooming Sirius, the legendary queen of the night. A flower so rare that it only opened its petals in the dark, releasing a fragrance that was creamy, velvety sweet, and laced with exotic warmth. Alexis was a man who had always gotten everything he wanted. He commanded boardrooms, crushed rivals, and bent the city to his standards. Yet, as he stared out at the dark horizon, he still found himself thinking of those striking silver eyes and that breathtaking hidden scent. He had seen the quiet devotion in Darvis's eyes when he held his boy. In Alexis's mind, that scent and that deep love belonged to a family, to a life that was already claimed. For the first time in his life, Alexis found himself staring at something he wanted with every fiber of his being, while genuinely unsure if he was allowed to have it. Chapter 3: Under the Enigma's Gaze. 2 days later, the financial department was summoned to the executive floor for an urgent afternoon briefing. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Alexis Jace. He was a silent, looming presence, the legendary enigma whose mere aura made room temperatures drop and confident alphas sweat through their collared shirts. Directly across from him stood Darvis, clicker in hand, stepping up to present the quarterly budget projections. Darvis spoke with quiet, practiced confidence. He pointed to spreadsheets, explained risk assessments, and broke down complex fiscal forecasts. To the rest of the board, he was performing flawlessly, a brilliant senior analyst doing his job. He had no idea that Alexis wasn't listening to a single word. For the first time in his entire life, the untouchable Alexis Jace was completely unraveling. The Enigma's formidable discipline, the iron willpower that had built an empire and brought entire industries to their knees, was crumbling in real time. He sat across the chair, staring at the quiet man before him, unable to hold himself back. He wanted the Omega. Alexis's dark eyes were pinned on Darvis's lips as they moved, watching the subtle flush of warmth on his cheeks. He stared at the soft, silky feel of Darvis's exposed neck above his collar, imagining what it would feel like under his touch. Right beneath those heavy medical suppressants, that intoxicating scent of night-blooming Sirius was calling out to his secondary nature, pulling at his instincts with a fierce, magnetic force. This was Alexis Jace, the man who commanded rooms without raising his voice, the leader whom powerful men knelt before, the ruler who governed his domain with an iron fist. Yet as Darvis concluded his slide deck and the meeting ended, Alexis just sat there in silence. If anyone had asked Jace what he had taken away from that entire presentation, he wouldn't have remembered a single damn thing. "That concludes the report, Mr. Jace," Darvis said softly, his silver eyes meeting Alexis's intense gaze for a brief second before he quickly looked down. Darvis's heart hammered against his ribs. Everyone in town feared Alexis Jace, and Darvis was no exception. As he packed away his laptop with steadying fingers, Darvis misread the Enigma's heavy, unblinking gaze entirely. He saw the sharp, unyielding way Jace had stared at him the entire time and worried he hadn't been impressive enough, completely unaware that he had just driven the most dangerous man in the city out of his mind. Chapter 4: The Echo of a Word. The rest of the afternoon passed in an anxious blur for Darvis. Every time he reviewed his presentation slides, he picked apart his own delivery, convinced he had fallen short of Jace Enterprises' ruthless standards. When the clock finally struck 5, he packed his briefcase with a heavy sigh, relieved to leave the corporate pressure behind for the day. He rode the elevator down to the ground floor, his tension instantly melting away as he stepped into the bright, cheerful lobby of the building's daycare center. The moment the playroom door opened, a small blur of energy came racing across the colorful rug. "Dada!" Luca shouted the word with absolute, unfiltered joy, his little yellow dinosaur sneakers squeaking against the floor. He threw his tiny arms around Darvis's legs, burying his soft cheek against his pants. Darvis couldn't help the warm, breathless laugh that escaped his chest. He immediately knelt on the floor, scooping his 2-year-old up into a tight, protective embrace. "Hey, sweet boy," Darvis whispered, kissing the top of Luca's head and letting the heavy stress of the day wash out of him. "Did you have a good day?" Neither of them noticed the tall, imposing figure walking toward the main glass doors. Alexis Jace had been on his way to his private car, his mind still heavy with the lingering velvety scent of night-blooming Sirius that seemed trapped in his lungs. But as the small, clear sound of the word "Dada" echoed through the quiet lobby, Alexis's steps faltered. He stopped a few yards away, his dark, sharp eyes quietly tracking the scene. There was Darvis, no longer the quiet, anxious analyst who had stood trembling beneath his gaze in the boardroom. His silver eyes were bright, filled with a deep, boundless love as he cradled the little boy in his arms. And the toddler was clinging to him with absolute, unbreakable trust, calling him by the most intimate title a child could give: Dada. In that split second, a sudden sharp ache carved straight through Alexis's chest, a hollow, unfamiliar emptiness that hit him harder than any corporate blow ever could. Alexis was a man who had conquered every challenge put before him. He built empires, commanded rooms of powerful alphas, and bent the world to his standards. In his life, if he wanted something, he took it. But as he stood in the quiet lobby, watching the gentle warmth between father and son, reality struck him like a cold physical weight. Darvis wasn't just a quiet Omega hiding under suppressants. He was a dedicated family man. He had a home, a child who adored him, and, in Alexis's mind, a partner somewhere out there who shared that bond. Alexis Jace was many things: ruthless, dominant, and demanding, but he had a strict, unshakable code of honor. He would never cheat, never force himself into a sacred bond, and never play a role in breaking up a happy home. His Enigma instincts roared in protest, demanding he step closer, demanding he claim the rare flower scent that belonged to him. But Alexis forced his iron willpower back into place. He slammed an absolute door over his own desires. He had to stay far away. With one last dark look at the man with the silver eyes, Alexis turned on his heel and walked out into the cool evening air, letting the heavy glass doors seal shut behind him. Chapter 5: The Open Door. Saturday afternoon was warm and clear, the sky washed in a brilliant blue. It had been far too long since Darvis had taken a proper break, but today he sat on a green wooden bench at the city park, holding a cold drink and watching Luca run around in his little yellow dinosaur sneakers, giggling as he chased butterflies through the grass. Sitting next to Darvis on the bench was the only friend who had truly stuck by him through the nightmare of the past 2 years. Daniel, a solid, dependable alpha he and Davina had grown up with. "Anyone in the picture now?" Daniel asked, taking a sip from his drink and looking at Darvis with a soft, knowing smile. Darvis chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "You know how it is. It's just me and Luca." "Darvis, you seriously need to put yourself out there," Daniel pushed gently, his tone laced with genuine concern. "I know you want to take care of Luca and you're doing an incredible job. But a little self-care wouldn't hurt. You're allowed to live your life too." Darvis laughed, the sound light and musical. "I'm fine, Dan." "Really?" A short distance down the paved park trail, Alexis Jace was out for his evening jog. He had been trying to clear his head, trying to burn off the restless, heavy frustration that had plagued him all week. Then the wind shifted and a sound hit his ears. It was unmistakable. Alexis knew that light, breathless laugh by heart. His steps slowed, his dark eyes locking onto the bench under the oak tree. There sat Darvis, sitting close to another man. Alexis narrowed his eyes as he looked closer, the recognition hitting him instantly. That was Daniel, a remarkably easygoing alpha who had been in a few of Alexis's advanced business courses years ago. Alexis felt a sudden, sharp conflict. Every instinct told him to turn back, to respect the boundary he had drawn in his own mind. But the sight of Darvis sitting so close to another man stirred a dark, possessive ember deep in his chest. Deciding to face it head-on, Alexis stepped off the running trail and walked toward the bench. "Hello, Daniel," Alexis said, his deep baritone cutting through the quiet park air. Darvis instantly jumped to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs as his silver eyes widened. "Mr. Jace?" "Alexis." Daniel blinked, looking up in surprise before flashing an easygoing grin. "Man, it's been a while." Before Darvis could process his terrifying CEO standing in the middle of the park in athletic wear, a bright squeal echoed from the grass. Luca had spotted a family of ducks near the water's edge and was sprinting as fast as his little legs could carry him. Darvis's eyes went wide. "Excuse me, Luca. Slow down." Giving a quick, apologetic nod toward Alexis, Darvis hurried after the toddler. Daniel watched his friend run off, shaking his head with a warm, affectionate smile. "You know, Darvis works for you now," Daniel said, turning back to Alexis. "You've got to take care of him for me, man. He never socializes anymore. All he ever does is work and take care of that kid. He never takes a single second for himself." The casual request hung in the air, stirring the exact question Alexis had been burying all week. "I thought he had a family," Alexis said quietly, his voice low and carefully neutral. Daniel laughed softly, leaning back against the bench. "He does." Alexis turned his head, his brow furrowing as he glanced toward the pond. "The child's father?" Daniel looked confused for a second, then realization dawned on his face. Darvis isn't Luca's biological father. A heavy silence stretched between them. "Davina was," Daniel said softly, his voice dipping into a quiet, solemn tone. "Darvis's twin sister. 2 years ago, a drunk driver hit her and her husband on their way home. Neither of them made it." Daniel looked across the grass at Darvis, who was currently laughing and pointing at the ducklings for a wide-eyed Luca. Luca was 9 months old in an induced coma with a severe brain bleed. Everyone thought Darvis would break, but the second that baby woke up, Darvis legally adopted him, stepped up, and rebuilt his entire life from scratch. He works himself to the bone for that boy, Alexis. He doesn't go out, he doesn't date. It's just him and Luca. Alexis forgot to breathe. His fingers tightened around the bottle of water in his hand until the plastic crumpled, cracking sharply under the sheer force of his grip. Every conclusion he had drawn over the past week collapsed in an instant. There was no husband, no partner, no happy established home. He would be breaking up. The quiet Omega with the rare, breathtaking scent of night-blooming Sirius wasn't claimed by anyone. He was a survivor who had carried the crushing weight of grief and single fatherhood entirely on his own shoulders. As Darvis walked back toward the bench, holding a babbling Luca in his arms, Alexis looked at him, really looked at him, with a dark, fierce clarity that shattered every barrier he had built. His window wasn't just open. The entire door had been ripped off its hinges. Chapter 6: A Shift in the Tide. Monday arrived, and Alexis Jace walked into the Jace Enterprises skyscraper with a renewed sense of purpose. He had spent the remainder of his weekend in a remarkably good mood, a rare sight that hadn't gone unnoticed. On Sunday, his mother had come to visit him at his penthouse. Mrs. Jace was a remarkably perceptive Omega, possessing the quiet power to wrap both Alexis and his formidable father around her little finger with a single look. The second she had stepped into his condo, she knew something was up. It hadn't taken long for her to get her son to tell her everything. "I would advise you not to be pushy or you'll lose him," she had warned gently, taking a sip of her tea. "He has spent the last 2 years doing everything alone, carrying the world on his shoulders. It might take a while for him to trust someone. But I am sure I trained you to be the biggest flirt when it counts." They had both laughed, but Alexis took her words to heart. Earlier on Monday afternoon, Alexis had instructed his secretary to purchase a top-tier, ultra-safe toddler car seat and have it installed in the back of his executive sedan. By the time the clock struck 5, Alexis found himself standing in the quiet lobby near the building's daycare, right as Darvis was arriving to pick up his son. "Daniel asked me to take care of you," Alexis said softly as Darvis blinked in surprise at his sudden presence. Before Darvis could process the statement, the daycare door opened. 2-year-old Luca spotted the tall man in the suit, his face lighting up as he toddled forward on his little legs and threw his arms around Alexis's knee. "Hello, Papa," Luca babbled happily. Darvis's face flushed a deep crimson. "Luca, no," he corrected immediately, a shy, mortified smile tugging at his lips as he scooped the boy up. "I am so sorry, Mr. Jace." "I'm giving you two a ride home," Alexis interrupted smoothly. Darvis hesitated, reflexively trying to decline. "Oh no, Mr. Jace, you really don't have to." But Alexis didn't take no for an answer. He ushered them out toward his private vehicle. When Alexis opened the rear door, Darvis paused, staring at the brand-new high-end child seat installed in the back. Darvis quietly assumed it belonged to one of Alexis's relatives or siblings' kids. After all, why else would a powerful, unmarried CEO have a car seat in his personal vehicle? The drive was quiet and comfortable. When they arrived at Darvis's modest apartment building, Darvis felt a sudden rush of gratitude. Wanting to properly thank his boss, he invited Alexis inside for a quick cup of coffee. When Alexis stepped across the threshold, his towering presence seemed to fill the small space completely. Yet, beneath the modest home's quiet stillness, Alexis breathed in deeply, loving the subtle, comforting, lingering warmth of Darvis's scent that saturated the air. After finishing his coffee, Alexis thanked him politely and took his leave, exercising the precise restraint his mother had advised. The next morning, the entire 12th floor was thrown into a quiet panic. At 8:30 a.m., Alexis Jace personally walked into the financial department carrying a warm cup of gourmet coffee. Without saying a single word to the staring, terrified employees, he walked straight to Darvis's cubicle, set the cup down on his desk and walked out. Whispers erupted across the floor the moment the elevator doors closed. Chapter 7: The Shield in the Dark. 5 days passed in a gentle, flickering rhythm. Unbeknownst to Darvis, Alexis had quietly instructed the corporate daycare director to inform him immediately if anything, no matter how minor, ever happened to Luca. The daycare was managed by a childhood friend of Alexis's, so she understood the request and agreed without question. That vigilance proved crucial on Friday afternoon. While playing in the daycare room, 2-year-old Luca suddenly collapsed, his little body falling into a violent seizure, a delayed, terrifying echo of the severe brain injury he had survived as an infant. The daycare staff immediately called an ambulance and contacted Darvis. When the call reached the 12th floor, Darvis's world shattered. Dropping his pen, he ran as fast as his legs could carry him, leaving his open files, his phone, and his briefcase behind as he bolted out of the building toward the hospital. Moments later, Alexis received the alert from the daycare director. Rushing straight to the 12th floor, Alexis stepped into Darvis's abandoned cubicle. He swiftly packed up Darvis's laptop, gathered his personal belongings, retrieved his coat, and headed straight for the emergency room. When Alexis arrived at St. John's Hospital, the doctors had already stabilized the toddler. The ER physician confirmed it was a late post-traumatic seizure, starting Luca on anti-epileptic medication before admitting him for overnight observation. Alexis found Darvis standing outside the observation room. The poor Omega looked like he had aged 10 years in a matter of hours, his eyes wide and hollow, his hands trembling violently. Every Enigma instinct inside Alexis screamed at him to pull Darvis into his arms, to wrap him in his scent and reassure him that everything would be all right. Instead, practicing careful self-control, Alexis stepped forward gently. He handed Darvis his retrieved phone, his coat, and a fresh cup of coffee. "I spoke with the chief of medicine," Alexis said softly, his voice a steady anchor in the chaotic room. "I'm going to consult with the doctor now to make sure everything is taken care of." Alexis personally ensured Luca was moved to the hospital's finest private executive suite, a quiet, spacious room equipped with a comfortable bed for Darvis to sleep beside his nephew. An hour later, a private courier arrived at the room, sent by Alexis. The delivery included fresh supplies, hot, nutritious meals, a change of clothes for Darvis, and soft toys for when Luca woke up. Darvis sat on the edge of the hospital bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of Luca's chest. He looked at the spread of food, the soft clothes, and the sheer level of quiet protection surrounding him. He didn't feel romantic or overwhelmed with affection. Instead, he just felt utterly, deeply exhausted, realizing for the first time in 2 years how heavy the weight on his shoulders had actually been, and how much energy it took to carry it completely alone. Yet, beneath the massive sense of relief, a guarded part of Darvis pulled back. Why was Alexis Jace, a man known for his cold, unyielding corporate authority, doing all of this for a senior analyst he barely knew? Was it pity? Corporate liability? Or something else entirely? Darvis pulled the blanket up to Luca's chin and leaned his head back against the pillow. He was deeply grateful. He couldn't deny the sheer relief of not having to fight through this terrifying night isolated from help. But as he listened to the steady hum of the heart monitor, his walls didn't simply crumble. He simply resolved to stay observant, quietly wondering what the city's most feared Enigma actually wanted from him. Chapter 8: Safe in the Storm. Luca needed to be kept under observation for 2 more days just to ensure the medication had stabilized his system and he was truly out of the woods. The next afternoon, the door to the private suite opened, and Daniel walked in, followed closely by Alexis. "You look like a ghost, Darvis," Daniel said gently, taking in his friend's pale face and dark under-eye circles. "Go lie down in the side room for a few hours. We've got Luca." Darvis hesitated, his protective instincts flaring, but the bone-deep exhaustion won out. "Just an hour," he murmured quietly. Alexis watched Darvis retreat into the small adjoining bedroom, his heart aching at how fragile the Omega looked. He wanted to do more. He wanted to pull Darvis close, scent him, and lay all his intentions out in the open. But looking at the tired father, Alexis knew now was not the time to press. Turning his attention to the hospital bed, Alexis sat beside Luca. It didn't take long before the Enigma was entirely immersed in playing with the toddler, making subtle funny faces that had Luca breaking into bright, ringing giggles. From the doorway of the side room, Darvis paused before lying down. Watching Alexis, a man who commanded boardrooms with an iron fist, gently entertaining a 2-year-old brought a genuine, unbidden smile to Darvis's face. For the first time in 2 years, a soft wave of peace washed over him. He was happy knowing Luca was surrounded by people who cared for him, and for the first time in a long time, Darvis felt safe. When Darvis finally woke up hours later, the room was quiet. Luca was fast asleep, clean and fed. Daniel had already left for a date he couldn't reschedule. And sitting in the corner armchair was Alexis Jace, fast asleep. His massive, broad-shouldered frame completely overwhelmed the hospital chair, making it look comically small beneath him. Darvis couldn't help but feel a sudden pang of pity for the poor chair. On the bedside table, fresh food, water, and everything Darvis could possibly need had been neatly laid out. The next day, the doctors cleared Luca for discharge, prescribing a daily regimen of anti-epileptic doses for the foreseeable future. Alexis personally drove them home, carrying Luca up the stairs and ensuring they were settled. Standing at the apartment door, Darvis looked up at the Enigma. "Thank you, Mr. Jace. For everything. I don't know what I would have done." Alexis gave a single warm nod. "Rest, Darvis. Take all the time you need." With a heartfelt thank you, Darvis closed the door, determined to focus on his nephew's recovery and move forward. Chapter 9: A Blast from the Past. A week later, Darvis was back at his desk on the 12th floor, the quiet rhythm of work providing a comforting distraction. But by mid-afternoon, a strange, electric tension rippled through the financial department. Whispers began to spread like wildfire from cubicle to cubicle. "Did you see who just walked into the executive elevator? Is that Julian?" "It is Mr. Jace's ex." Darvis kept his head down, but he couldn't block out the hushed chatter surrounding him. Julian was a striking high-fashion Omega whose ethereal, breathtaking beauty made the word beautiful feel like an understatement for a man. Years ago, Julian and Alexis had been the city's power couple, a pairing everyone assumed would end in a grand, legendary bonding. But Julian had left the country to pursue an international modeling career, putting an ocean between them. Now he was back. "They looked incredible together back then," a coworker whispered nearby. "He's probably back to claim his Enigma. I mean, who else could possibly stand beside Alexis Jace?" Darvis stared at his computer screen, his fingers freezing over his keyboard as he caught a brief glimpse of Julian stepping out of the glass elevator. Julian looked like he belonged on magazine covers and at charity galas. Darvis spent his mornings chasing a toddler through daycare and his evenings calculating grocery budgets. They weren't even living in the same world. He suddenly understood why everyone had once called them the perfect couple. Standing beside Julian, Alexis looked exactly as he should, untouchable, elegant, and far beyond the reach of an ordinary analyst. An odd, heavy tightness settled deep in Darvis's chest, erecting a fresh, sturdy wall around his heart. High above on the top floor, the executive doors opened, and the stunning Omega walked straight toward Alexis's private office, fully confident that the door would open for him just as it always had. Chapter 10: Clearing the Air. Alexis leaned back in his leather executive chair, his dark eyes cold as Julian glided into his office with practiced elegance. Years ago, Alexis had loved Julian fiercely. As an enigma, Alexis felt things with a rare, absolute depth, and when he had given his heart to Julian, he had tolerated the younger Omega's jealous fits and constant drama. But when Julian walked away for his modeling career, cutting ties without a second thought, Alexis had shut that door forever. He had assumed his capacity for that level of intense emotion was gone, until a quiet analyst with silver eyes and the hidden velvety scent of night-blooming Sirius walked into his life. That scent had imprinted on Alexis's mind from the very first second. "I am not going back, Julian," Alexis said, his voice dropping into a hard, unyielding register. "I am in love with someone else." Julian let out a sharp, dismissive laugh, leaning against the mahogany desk. "Love? Alexis, please. How is that even possible?" Refusing to accept the rejection, Julian sat down on the plush leather couch and made it clear he wasn't leaving. Alexis didn't waste another breath arguing. When the clock struck noon, Alexis simply stood up and headed for the executive elevator. Julian immediately fell into step behind him. The elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, instantly killing every hushed conversation in the room. Whispers died down to total silence as the employees watched the stunning, magazine cover Omega follow their formidable CEO straight into the cubicle farm. Alexis stopped right in front of Darvis's desk. "It's time for lunch," Alexis announced smoothly, his baritone carrying across the quiet floor. "Daniel asked me to bring you along." Darvis stared up at him in absolute disbelief. Next to Alexis, Julian looked at Darvis as if he were an alien, his eyes narrowing in sheer disdain before he turned on his heel and stormed off, already pulling out his phone to demand his team get him everything on the ordinary analyst standing in his way. Darvis opened his mouth to refuse Alexis's invitation, but as he felt the heavy stares and rising whispers of every co-worker around them, he realized causing a scene would only make it worse. With a quiet sigh, he grabbed his coat and followed Alexis down to the private garage. Chapter 11: The Promise. The moment the heavy doors of Alexis's executive sedan clicked shut, the exhaustion Darvis had been harboring for days finally bubbled over. "What do you want from me, Mr. Alexis?" Darvis asked, his voice thick with frustration. "I do not fit into your world and I do not need any drama around me. I just want to do my job, go home and be happy with my son. I don't want this kind of attention." Alexis didn't snap or get defensive. He simply pulled out into the afternoon traffic and offered a calm, reassuring smile. "It's just lunch. Nothing special. And I am sorry about what happened earlier." "Your ex is back," Darvis pressed, leaning his head back against the leather seat. "Everyone in the building says you belong together. I do not want to get caught up in whatever that is." They drove in silence for a few long minutes before Alexis finally spoke, his tone stripping away every corporate barrier between them. "I dated Julian, but we are genuinely over," Alexis said firmly. "Does he know that?" Darvis countered quietly. "I have told him several times and I made it crystal clear again today," Alexis replied, glancing over at Darvis with an intensity that made the air in the car grow thick. "Darvis, you've had my attention from the moment I first saw you. I wanted you from the very beginning. But I believed you already belonged to someone else, so I forced myself to stay away." Alexis slowed the car as they reached a quiet, upscale restaurant. He turned fully in his seat, looking straight into Darvis's silver eyes. "Please give me a chance to show you that I am truly serious about us. Don't shut me down and please don't turn down my advances." Darvis let out a breathless, incredulous laugh, shaking his head in total confusion. "Mr. Alexis, what could I possibly have to offer you? I have a son, a past full of grief and nothing to my name." Alexis's eyes softened, anchored by a deep, unshakable certainty. "Just give me a chance to care for you." They ate their meal in a quiet, heavy silence. Darvis picked at his food, his mind spinning in circles. As he looked across the table at the most feared, powerful enigma in the city, one lingering question echoed loudly in his mind. What could Alexis Jace possibly want with an orphan man who had nothing left to give? Chapter 12: The Script Rewritten. Julian tossed the thin manila folder onto his glass coffee table, letting out a sharp, mocking laugh. He had read every single line on the piece of paper detailing Darvis's life. The man had nothing, no influential family name, no status, no wealth, and a dead-end past buried in tragedy. To Julian, who had spent years in high-fashion circles surrounded by elite alphas and wealthy omegas, Darvis was a nobody. Nothing of value. Julian had loved Alexis, yes, but he had simply wanted to conquer the global fashion scene first. Now that he was back, he was convinced that no ordinary analyst could ever stand between him and his Enigma. Darvis wasn't an issue of importance, he was just a temporary distraction. Alexis, however, made it abundantly clear that Darvis was anything but temporary. Over the next 2 weeks, the Enigma's pursuit shifted into plain sight. The subtle, private gestures became open, unshakable devotion. Every morning, Alexis personally walked to the 12th floor to leave gourmet coffee on Darvis's desk. In the evenings, he waited near the daycare to drive father and son home. During afternoon breaks, Alexis could often be found up on the building's sunny rooftop terrace, shedding his sharp executive jacket to kick a soft ball around with 2-year-old Luca. The toddler's bright, happy shouts of "Papa" echoed across the terrace far too many times for anyone to miss, and the initial office rumors quickly turned into warm, supportive smiles from Darvis's colleagues. That Friday evening, Daniel called Darvis while he was folding laundry at home. "I hear Alexis Jace is openly courting you now," Daniel said with a quiet chuckle. "Why are you still holding back, Darvis? He's a great guy. Trust me, I've known him for years." Darvis sighed, folding a pair of small dinosaur pajamas. "I know he's being good to us, Dan, but how do I fit into his world? Look at him and look at me. I have nothing to offer." "You sell yourself way too short, Darvis," Daniel said firmly, his tone softening with genuine affection. "You survived the absolute worst life could throw at you, and you built a whole world for that boy out of pure love. Anyone would be lucky to have you. Give yourself and him a chance." The breakthrough came that weekend. Alexis took Darvis and Luca to the city zoo on Saturday morning. Watching Alexis carry Luca on his broad shoulders so the toddler could see the giraffes, buying ice cream, and gently wiping sticky chocolate off Luca's chin, the heavy, defensive layers around Darvis's heart finally began to drop. For the first time in 2 years, Darvis let himself lean into the warmth, allowing himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved to be cared for too. Across town, Julian stared at his phone in disbelief. A high society acquaintance had sent him a candid photo taken at the zoo. Alexis Jace, smiling warmly, holding a toddler in his arms while walking side by side with a silver-eyed Omega. Alexis Jace, playing house with a single father. This wasn't what Julian had envisaged. He had returned expecting Alexis to be pining, single, and waiting for him to reclaim his place at his side. Instead, the Enigma was genuinely falling for someone else. A dark, bitter anger boiled up Julian's throat, twisting his beautiful face into a cold mask. Alexis was his. He had built that man's devotion once, and he refused to let some grieving single father steal what belonged to him. Setting his phone face down on the table, Julian pulled out a private notebook and set his plans in motion. Chapter 13. The Duality of Enigma. Once Darvis finally lowered his guard, Alexis did not hesitate to show him what it felt like to be thoroughly, unconditionally loved. Despite his formidable Enigma nature, Alexis proved to be an absolute gentleman when it came to matters of the heart. Yet, to the rest of the world he remained a ruthless, unyielding force in the business world. The contrast was striking, almost mind-boggling to Darvis. How could the same man who stood in a boardroom on Thursday morning, bringing a disgruntled Alpha board member to his knees with a single cold, calculated sentence, be the very same man who spent Friday evening rolling around on the rug, letting a 2-year-old stack plastic blocks on his chest? Alexis cared for Darvis with a quiet, fierce devotion. He cooked, he helped clean, and he anticipated every single need before Darvis even realized it was there. Restocking pantry supplies, ordering healthy meals, and picking up Luca's favorite snacks, Alexis stepped into the quiet gaps of Darvis's life, offering the sturdy support Darvis had needed for 2 agonizing years. It was in the little, unprompted moments that Alexis truly stole Darvis's heart. On rainy evenings, Alexis would quietly swap Darvis's worn-out house slippers for cozy, plush ones he had brought over, kneeling on the hardwood floor without a second thought to slide them onto Darvis's tired feet. When Darvis stayed up late working on complex budget reports, Alexis would quietly gently take the laptop from his lap, set it on the nightstand and pull Darvis into his chest, rubbing soft, slow circles into his lower back until Darvis fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep he had experienced in years. Alexis made sure Darvis never felt like a burden. On weekends he would carry a sleepy Luca on one broad shoulder while using his free arm to pull Darvis close against his side, shielding him from the chilly evening breeze as they walked through the quiet park. He learned how Darvis took his tea, how to soothe Luca when a mild teething fever hit, and exactly where Darvis was ticklish, often using it to coax a bright, breathless laugh out of the silver-eyed Omega after a long day. For the first time in his life, Darvis wasn't just surviving. He was being pampered, held, and cherished. And then the butterflies finally arrived. Darvis found himself sitting up a little straighter at the sound of a familiar knock on his door. He caught himself surreptitiously burying his face in the couch throw pillow just to inhale the faint, woody trace of Alexis's scent left behind. His heart fluttered when Alexis texted simple messages like, "Eat lunch, sweetheart," or, "Counting down the hours until I see you both," and he found himself smiling at his desk for no reason at all. He was falling. Hard, fast, and completely head over heels for his Enigma. Chapter 14: The Storm Brews. While Darvis was opening his heart, Julian was unspooling. Having been blocked on every single one of Alexis's private and professional lines, Julian bypassed the Enigma entirely and went straight for what he considered the weakest link. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, as Darvis walked toward his building after dropping Luca at daycare, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Julian stepped out, his beautiful face twisted into a sharp, sneering mask. "Stay away from Alexis," Julian spat, blocking Darvis's path. "He belongs to me. You're just a pathetic rebound he's using to fill the time until I came back. Don't embarrass yourself." Darvis stood frozen, utterly shocked by the sudden, aggressive confrontation. But before he could even process Julian's cruel words, the real blow came the next morning. A notorious high society gossip blog published an article featuring leaked, grainy photos of Darvis, Alexis, and Luca titled, "Corporate CEO Playing House. Has the legendary Enigma traded high society for an ordinary single father?" The whispers on the 12th floor became deafening. Panic seized Darvis's throat. He didn't care about his own reputation, but the thought of Luca's face on tabloids, or the toddler being dragged into a media circus, terrified him to his very core. When Alexis arrived at Darvis's apartment an hour later, having rushed straight from headquarters after seeing the article, he found Darvis standing near the kitchen island, trembling. "I told you I don't want this drama," Darvis said, his voice cracking as tears filled his silver eyes. "I can't expose Luca to this, Alexis. He's just a baby. I'm sorry, but I don't think." "Don't say it," Alexis cut in sharply, his voice laced with a sudden raw desperation. His heart slammed against his ribs as he stepped closer, his hands shaking slightly. "Please, don't, Darvis. We decided to be together. Trust me to handle it." Darvis looked up, his mind completely torn. He was terrified, confused, and fiercely protective of his son. Every ounce of strength he had possessed over the last 2 years had been reserved for Luca alone. Yet, his heart belonged so strongly to the man standing in front of him. Alexis stepped into his space, reaching out to gently frame Darvis's face in his large, warm hands. He held him there, forcing Darvis to meet his dark, resolute gaze. "Trust me," Alexis whispered softly, his thumb gently wiping away a stray tear. He placed a long, tender kiss on Darvis's forehead, lingering there for a beat before pulling back and turning toward the door. The moment the apartment door clicked shut behind him, the gentle softness in Alexis's eyes vanished, replaced by an icy, terrifying calm. Pulling out his phone, he speed-dialed his executive assistant before he even reached the elevator. "Call the publisher of that gossip blog immediately," Alexis commanded, his voice low and razor-sharp. "Tell them they have exactly 10 minutes to remove every copy of that article and every photograph of Darvis and Luca. I also want a full public apology and retraction." He stepped into the elevator, his reflection cold and unreadable in the polished steel doors. "If that story is still online when those 10 minutes are up," he continued, "file defamation and invasion of privacy lawsuits against everyone involved. Freeze every legal option available. I don't care what it costs. I want that company buried." "Understood, Mr. Jace," his assistant replied immediately. Alexis ended the call without another word. He had given them one opportunity to do the right thing. If they refused, he would erase them. There was only one more matter left to settle. Julian. Alexis strode out of the building and into the waiting executive sedan, his destination already set. Chapter 15. The Boundary. 20 minutes later, Julian's luxury apartment door flew open. Julian smiled, a triumphant, satisfied look spreading across his beautiful face as he saw the tall Enigma standing in the hallway. "Finally," Julian purred, leaning casually against the doorframe. "You've come to your senses. I knew you'd remember what we had. You've always come back to me." Alexis didn't move. His expression was completely unreadable. "Stay away from Darvis, Julian." His voice was low, cold, deadly. The warmth vanished from Julian's smile. "Alexis. You heard me." Alexis took one deliberate step forward. The oppressive weight of an enigma rolled into the hallway like an invisible storm. Even Julian instinctively straightened. "Stay away from Darvis. Stay away from Luca. Stay away from my family." Julian's eyes widened. "My family?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "You're choosing a nobody over me? He has nothing. No name. No status. No connections. He came from an orphanage. He isn't your equal." Alexis's eyes turned glacial. "My equal? You think that's what I've ever wanted?" Julian stared at him. A dangerous silence settled between them. Alexis continued quietly. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted my position." Alexis's voice became almost frighteningly calm. "Darvis is the first person who has ever looked at me and wished I were simply Alexis." Julian felt something crack inside his chest. "So that's it? You really love him?" Alexis didn't hesitate. "Yes." One word. No uncertainty. No regret. Julian's face slowly hardened. "You know how dangerous I can be when something I love is threatened," Alexis said, stepping close enough that Julian had to tilt his head upward. "You were once my friend and I cared for you once. But that part of my life is over." He held Julian's gaze without blinking. "Forget the past we shared. I already have. I have the future I deserve now." His voice dropped into a lethal whisper. "And if you ever come near Darvis or my son again, I won't just destroy your career. I'll make sure there isn't a single place in this industry willing to remember your name." For the first time since returning to the city, Julian saw no hesitation in Alexis's eyes. No lingering affection. No guilt. Only absolute devotion to someone else. Alexis turned on his heel without another word. The elevator doors slid open. As they closed, Julian remained frozen in the silent hallway. Then, very slowly, his beautiful face twisted into something darker. Something broken. Something dangerous. He finally understood. Darvis wasn't Alexis's weakness. He was Alexis's reason. And that made him the most dangerous obstacle Julian had ever faced. Chapter 16. Anchored in the dark. Julian was consumed by a quiet, burning madness. If he couldn't have Alexis, then he was going to systematically destroy every single obstruction standing in his way. Unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows, Alexis took Darvis and Luca to his parents' estate that weekend. The reception was warmer than Darvis could have ever anticipated. Mrs. Jace took one look at little Luca and immediately gathered the toddler into her arms with tears of pure joy in her eyes, while Alexis's father welcomed Darvis with a proud, approving smile. Leaving Luca happily pampered in his grandparents' care, Alexis took Darvis out for a quiet evening at the movies. Sitting side by side in the dim theater, they shared a large bowl of popcorn. Every single time their fingers brushed against one another in the tub, the air between them grew thick and electric. Finally, Alexis stopped pretending. Reaching across the armrest, he slid his large, warm fingers through Darvis's, holding his hand firmly for the rest of the film. Walking back to the car after the movie, Darvis couldn't stop the soft smile stretching across his face. He kept remembering the effortless way Luca had melted into Mrs. Jace's arms. In the span of a few months, Luca had gained a protective papa and a set of doting grandparents, something Darvis had never envisioned during those dark, lonely hospital nights. His heart felt overwhelmingly full. As they settled into the front seats of the executive sedan, Darvis turned to face the Enigma. "I'm happy," Darvis whispered softly, the admission coming straight from his soul. Alexis looked at him in the quiet dark of the car, his dark eyes glowing with a fierce, profound warmth. Without a word, he reached out, cupping Darvis's jaw, and pulled him into a deep, long-awaited kiss. All the longings, the years of bottled-up grief, the fear, and the quiet sacrifices Darvis had carried poured directly into that first kiss. At the same time, Alexis allowed his Enigma pheromones to gently fill the closed space of the car, a rich, protective embrace laced with dark wood and warm amber. Darvis felt instantly giddy with love, leaning heavily into the scent. He had spent 2 years fighting the world alone, completely unaware of what an absolute anchor a partner's pheromones could provide. Beneath Alexis's touch, Darvis felt seen, profoundly safe and deeply secured. The kiss lasted a long, breathtaking time, leaving them both flushed and breathless. Alexis pulled back just an inch, his dark eyes sparkling with adoration as he looked at the blushing Omega. "Let's go get our son." Darvis's heart swelled to its absolute limit, a breathless laugh escaping his lips at hearing Alexis call Luca their son. Neither of them noticed the quiet click of a long-range camera lens hidden in the shadows of the parking garage across the street. Chapter 17: The Last Straw. The next morning, a thick manila envelope sat on Julian's glass desk. Julian opened it, tipping the contents out onto the polished surface. Dozens of high-resolution photographs spilled across the table. There was Darvis, laughing and kissing Alexis inside the sedan. There was Alexis, holding Darvis's face with a look of helpless, absolute devotion, a look Julian had spent years trying to secure for himself only to fail. And there were photos of Alexis's parents, smiling warmly as they held Luca on the steps of the Jace family estate. Alexis had given this nobody everything. His heart, his family, his protection, and his future. Julian stared at the photos as his breathing turned shallow and ragged. His knuckles turned white as he slammed his palm onto the desk, crushing one of the glossy prints beneath his hand. This was the absolute last straw. Darvis had taken the life that belonged to him, and Julian was no longer interested in gentle threats or public tabloid rumors. If Alexis refused to come back to him willingly, Julian would make sure Darvis wasn't around to enjoy the life he had stolen. Pulling out a burner phone from his top drawer, Julian dialed a private, unlisted number, his voice dropping into a cold, lethal whisper. "I have a job for you," Julian said into the receiver. "And I need it done immediately." Chapter 18 vanished into thin air. It was past 9 a.m. and Darvis was not at his desk. Alexis stood in the middle of the 12th floor, holding his phone to his ear as it went straight to voicemail for the 5th time in a row. No answer from Darvis. No update from the corporate daycare. No sign of Luca. A sharp, instinctive knot of dread tightened in Alexis's chest. Leaving the office immediately, Alexis drove straight to Darvis's apartment. He punched in the security code he had memorized weeks ago and pushed the door open. The apartment was entirely empty. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, and no forced entry. Yet, when Alexis stepped outside to review the hallway CCTV system, the feeds had been conveniently cut off, a black screen flashing a signal error for the exact hours of early morning. Alexis immediately called the police. The responding officers took the disappearance seriously, especially after learning that a 2-year-old child was missing and the hallway CCTV had been disabled. They opened a missing person investigation, alerted nearby units, and requested access to traffic cameras and phone records. However, because there was no forced entry, ransom demand, or confirmed witness, they could not yet prove that Darvis and Luca had been abducted. "We are treating this as urgent," the lead officer told him. "But we need evidence before we can classify it as a kidnapping." That answer was not enough for Alexis. Alexis almost snapped the officer's badge in half right then and there. "I'm happy." Darvis's words from just last night echoed in Alexis's mind, whispered while wrapped snugly in his arms inside the car, flushed and giddy with love. Darvis would never have run away. He hadn't left on his own. Desperate, Alexis pulled every favor he had, calling in private security contractors and reviewing neighboring street cameras. But whoever had done this was precise. It felt as if Darvis and Luca had vanished into thin air. Feeling the walls closing in, Alexis called his father, his voice raw with a lethal edge. "They're gone, Dad. Someone took them." For 24 grueling hours, Alexis didn't sleep, eat, or sit down. His Enigma aura grew so thick, dangerous, and oppressive that even his high-ranking security team struggled to stand near him. He burned through contacts, pulled corporate favors, and tracked untraceable burner accounts. Finally, deep into the second night, a breakthrough clue came in. A ping from a black SUV that had bypassed city toll booths led straight to an abandoned industrial warehouse on the harbor docks. Chapter 19: The Wrath of an Enigma. Charged with absolute fury, Alexis didn't wait for backup units. He charged to the warehouse accompanied only by 3 of his most trusted, heavily armed security allies. As they slipped through the rusted side doors of the facility, the low, mocking voice of Julian echoed through the rafters, punctuated by the heartbreaking, terrified crying of a toddler. The sound of Luca's tears broke something fundamental inside Alexis. Before his security team could even clear the entrance, Alexis moved with the speed of light. He tore through the hired guards pointing guns at him, disarming them in brutal, fluid motions. Reaching the main floor, he released his suppressed Enigma pheromones, targeting every enemy in the room with absolute, crushing force, sparing only Darvis and Luca. The air turned instantly toxic for the attackers. Hired men dropped their weapons, collapsing to their knees, clutching their throats as they choked and struggled to breathe under the sheer pressure of an enraged Enigma. "Papa! Papa!" Luca screamed, his tiny hands reaching through the wooden ropes tying him near a chair. "How could you?" Alexis roared, his voice vibrating through the concrete floor as he pinned Julian against a metal pillar, the model dropping to his knees, gasping for air. "I warned you, Julian. I warned you. Can't you see we belong together?" Julian choked out, tears of anger and fear streaming down his face. "What do you see in him? We were together for years. When did you even meet this imposter? He grew up in an orphanage, for heaven's sake, Alexis." Consumed with dark anger, Alexis looked down at Julian with pure disgust. Before he could do something irreversible, the sirens blared outside. The police stormed the building, taking over the scene and taking Julian and his hired men into custody. Alexis turned on his heel and ran straight toward Darvis, his own hands bruised and bleeding from the fight. "Darvis? I am so sorry," Alexis choked out, his voice trembling violently as he reached out to untie them. "I told you to trust me and I failed you." Alexis reached to scoop Luca into his arms, but the moment the toddler was freed, Darvis pulled Luca tightly against his chest. Darvis didn't look at Alexis with love, warmth, or relief. His silver eyes were completely hollow, drained of every emotion. When Alexis tried to hold him, Darvis simply pushed his hands away. Without saying a single word, Darvis carried a sobbing Luca past the police line, walked out into the cold night air, flagged down a passing taxi and went straight home. Chapter 20 The Threshold. Alexis drove right behind the taxi the entire way, his heart skipping wildly every time he remembered the cold, distant look in Darvis's eyes. When they reached the apartment building, Alexis hurried up the stairs behind them, stopping just as Darvis unlocked his front door. "Darvis, please," Alexis pleaded, his voice cracking as he reached for the doorframe. "Please talk to me." Darvis stopped on the threshold, turning slowly. He looked completely exhausted, his clothing rumpled, his hair messy and his skin pale. Luca was clinging to his neck, burying his tear-stained face into Darvis's shoulder. "I told you I didn't want to expose Luca to any drama," Darvis whispered, his voice dangerously quiet, devoid of the warmth it had carried just 24 hours ago. "He is my only family, Alexis. And your crazy ex left us tied up in the dark, hungry, and terrified for an entire day." Tears welling in his silver eyes, Darvis looked up at Alexis with a hollow, devastated expression. "I always knew this. When I let myself be happy, this happened." The words hit Alexis like a physical blow, leaving him completely breathless. "Darvis, please. I'm so sorry." "I can't think right now," Darvis interrupted softly, hugging the sobbing toddler tighter against his chest. "I just need my son to feel safe. I would like to be alone." Alexis felt as though a blade had been plunged straight into his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to push inside, to wrap them both in his arms and shield them from the rest of the world. But looking at Darvis's trembling, broken frame, Alexis forced himself to respect his boundaries. "Okay," Alexis whispered, his voice hollow and raw. "Okay." Darvis stepped inside and quietly shut the door, sliding the deadbolt into place. Outside in the quiet, dim hallway, the powerful, untouchable CEO of Jace Enterprises didn't leave. He sank down onto the cold floor, sliding his back against the wall directly in front of their apartment door, and stayed right there through the long, dark night. Chapter 21 The Surrender. The next morning, the heavy wooden door creaked open. Darvis carried a quiet, sleeping Luca in his arms, intending to head straight to the hospital for a full evaluation. But as the door swung outward, the toddler's eyelids fluttered open. "Papa," Luca piped up weakly. Alexis jerked awake instantly. His custom suit was rumpled, dark shadow dusted his jaw, and his eyes were bloodshot from a night spent sitting on the cold hardwood floor. He scrambled to his feet, taking in the sight of Darvis standing on the threshold. Darvis looked down at the formidable Enigma who had spent the entire night guarding their door like a faithful sentinel. Rationally, Darvis knew yesterday's nightmare wasn't Alexis's fault. But the terror had consumed him all night. What if the seizures returned? What if Luca was permanently traumatized? What? A sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion crashed through Darvis. Seeing Alexis sitting there, raw and devoted, the terrifying grip of fear finally broke its hold over him. His knees buckled, and he collapsed forward straight into Alexis's waiting arms. Darvis shook violently, burying his face into Alexis's chest as heavy, racking sobs tore from his throat. All the suppressed terror, the exhaustion, and the trauma of the past 24 hours washed out of him in a desperate torrent. Alexis immediately wrapped his broad arms around them both, pulling Darvis and Luca tightly into his chest. He released a soft, steadying wash of warm amber and darkwood pheromones, soothing Darvis's frantic senses and letting him cry until there were no tears left to shed. Once the storm passed, Alexis gently guided them back inside. Alexis took a long hot shower, changed into clean clothes, and together, they drove straight to St. John's Hospital. After a thorough round of tests and neurological scans, the chief of medicine confirmed that Luca had suffered no physical injuries and showed no signs of new neurological damage. His scans were stable and there had been no further seizure activity. His anti-epileptic medication appeared to be working as intended, and the doctor advised continued monitoring and a follow-up with his neurologist. It was only then, hearing those words from the doctor, that Darvis let out a long, deep breath of pure relief, the tight knot in his chest finally unraveling. Chapter 22: An Unbroken Bond. With a clean bill of health, Alexis drove them straight to his parents' quiet, secured estate. The moment they walked through the front doors, Mrs. Jace gathered little Luca into her arms, holding the toddler tightly against her heart with soft, comforting murmurs. Knowing the little boy was completely safe, Alexis gently took Darvis's hand and led him up the grand staircase to his private wing. The second the heavy bedroom door clicked shut behind them, the lingering restraint between them vanished. Alexis pulled Darvis into his arms, his mouth finding Darvis's in a deep, desperate kiss that tasted of relief, devotion, and unspoken vows. They couldn't get enough of each other, pressing close, hands tangled in hair and clothes, grounding themselves in the real, solid proof that they were both safe and whole. When evening fell, they joined Alexis's parents for a quiet, comforting dinner. By the time the meal ended, Luca was sound asleep in his grandmother's arms, happily staying overnight in the estate's nursery. Upstairs in the quiet dark of the bedroom, Alexis pulled Darvis close beneath the sheets. In the soft stillness, Alexis spoke, his deep baritone trembling as he confessed everything he had felt during those agonizing 24 hours, the sickening terror of thinking he had lost them, the blinding relief when he found them, and the absolute, unshakable certainty that Darvis and Luca were his heart and soul. "I will cherish you, Darvis," Alexis whispered, his lips tracing the warm line of Darvis's jaw. "I will spend every day of my life protecting you and our son." Darvis leaned into the dark wood warmth of Alexis's pheromones, his fingers tracing the broad shoulders of his Enigma. In the quiet heat of the room, as soft sighs whispered into the night and gentle hands pulled them impossibly closer, their walls completely dissolved, fading into a dark, seamless quiet where only their deep, undeniable love remained. Chapter 23: Forever Undone. 6 months passed, and the entire city watched in awe as the legendary Enigma transformed. Alexis Jace remained as sharp and dominant as ever in the boardroom, but the cold, untouchable air around him had dissolved into a grounded, contented power. He was no longer the lone, feared bachelor, he was a devoted partner and a proud father. The Jace family estate had become a second home for Darvis and Luca. During their weekly private dinners, the grand dining room was always filled with warmth and laughter. Mrs. Jace utterly doted on her grandbaby, fussing over Luca constantly, gently dabbing his chin with a linen napkin, cutting his food into tiny, perfect shapes, and making sure his favorite berry juice was always stocked. "Look at him, Darvis, he's growing so fast." Mrs. Jace would beam, happily holding a wooden spoon as she fed Luca another bite, while Mr. Jace sat beside them on the floor after dinner, patiently building grand marble tracks with the toddler. Watching his nephew thrive in the middle of a loving, extended family filled Darvis with a quiet, boundless gratitude. Weekends were no longer spent tucked away in a tiny apartment calculating strict grocery budgets. Now the family often went shopping together. Alexis loved taking Darvis and Luca out to quiet boutique districts. Whether it was Alexis carrying bags while Darvis picked out soft knit sweaters, or Mrs. Jace insisting on buying Luca an entire wardrobe of adorable miniature coats, Darvis no longer felt the cold weight of surviving alone. He was surrounded, cherished, and deeply protected. On a cold winter evening, back in their quiet penthouse, the master bedroom was thick with the intoxicating velvety fragrance of night-blooming Sirius blended seamlessly with rich, protective amber. They lay tangled together in the warm sheets, skin against skin, flushed and breathless in the soft candlelight after Luca had been tucked into bed. Alexis hovered over Darvis, his dark eyes filled with a fierce, boundless adoration as he looked down at the man who had stolen his heart. Reaching down, Alexis gently parted the neck of Darvis's soft shirt, exposing the delicate, unblemished curve of his neck. Darvis looked up, silver eyes bright with absolute trust, and nodded softly. With quiet reverence, Alexis leaned down and pressed his mark firmly into the side of Darvis's neck. A surge of intense, electric warmth rushed through their veins, sealing their scent, their souls, and their lifelong partnership forever. Darvis let out a breathless, happy gasp, burying his fingers into Alexis's dark hair as the permanent bond clicked into place. And there, wrapped tightly in the arms of his Omega, the most ruthless, feared enigma in the city lay completely and beautifully undone. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more original BL heartstrings stories. Every story on this channel is an original work, written to bring you emotional romance, unforgettable characters, and heartwarming happy endings. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.